My name is Dr. Elias Thorne. If you had Googled me prior to November 14th, you would have found a list of dry academic publications, a tenure position at Oxford University, and a reputation as one of the most ferocious secular historians in the UK. I spent 40 years of my life deconstructing religious texts, analyzing them as sociological artifacts rather than divine truth. I didn't believe in angels. I didn't believe in an afterlife. And I certainly didn't believe in Jesus. To me, Jesus was a historical curiosity, a revolutionary carpenter whose legend outgrew his life. I am writing this now with hands that still tremble, not from age, but from the residual vibration of what I touched. I am writing this because I was wrong. I was catastrophically, beautifully wrong. And because the world has less than 2 months to prepare for what is coming in January 2026. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. I was in the middle of a lecture on the myth of prophecy in the expansive hall of divinity. The irony is not lost on me now. I was midway through explaining how ancient cultures manufactured future predictions to control the masses when the headache started. It wasn't a normal ache. It was a thunderclap behind my right eye. I remember gripping the wooden podium, the smell of cedar and floor wax sharp in my nose. I saw my students' faces blur into a watercolor smear. I tried to speak, to ask for water, but my tongue felt like lead. Then, the floor rushed up to meet me. Darkness didn't fall. It swallowed me whole. According to the medical report I read later, I suffered a massive hemorrhagic stroke. My heart stopped in the ambulance. I was clinically dead for 9 minutes and 20 seconds. But I wasn't dead. I was more alive than I have ever been. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the silence of an empty room, but a heavy velvet silence that felt like peace. The pain in my head was gone. The arthritis in my knees was gone. I was standing on a surface that looked like polished obsidian, but when I stepped, ripples of light moved outward from my feet. Elias. The voice didn't come from behind me. It resonated from inside my chest. It was a voice that sounded like the crash of ocean waves and the whisper of a mother calming a child, all at once. I turned around. Standing there was a man. But to call him a man feels like an insult to the majesty of what I saw. He was not the pale, fragile figure from the stained glass windows I had mocked for decades. He was power personified. His skin was the color of burnished bronze, and he wore a robe that seemed to be woven from the very fabric of light itself. But it was his eyes that broke me. They were eyes of fire, not burning with rage, but burning with a love so intense, so consuming, that I fell to my knees. In those eyes, I saw every sin I had ever committed, every arrogant paper I had written, every time I had mocked a believer. And yet, there was no condemnation. There was only a sorrowful, overwhelming welcome. "Lord?" I whispered, the word feeling foreign on my academic tongue. "You have spent a lifetime studying the shadows, Elias," he said. He didn't move. His lips, yet I heard every syllable with absolute clarity. "Now look at the source." He reached out a hand. I saw the scar on his wrist, a jagged, radiant mark that seemed to be the center of the universe. When he touched my shoulder, reality shifted. The obsidian floor dissolved. We were no longer in a void. We were standing on a precipice, looking down at the earth. But it wasn't the earth I knew from maps. It was a living, breathing organism. I could see veins of darkness pulsing through the continents. Fear, greed, war. But I also saw threads of gold, prayers, acts of kindness, love. "Time is short," Jesus said, his voice taking on a weight that made the very atmosphere tremble. "The world believes it has years to correct its course. It does not. The season of shifting is upon us." He pointed toward the timeline of the earth. I saw the calendar turn. The year 2025 faded, and 2026 emerged in bold, fiery letters. "I have brought you here," he continued, "not just to save your soul, Elias, but to make you a witness. You must go back. You must tell them what is coming in the first month of this new year. 5 seals are breaking. 5 events that will shake the foundations of your science and your skepticism. I wanted to beg him to let me stay. The love radiating from him was addictive. The thought of returning to my cold, dead body in a hospital room was agonizing. But he held up a hand, demanding my attention. "Watch," he commanded. "This is the first." The scene below us zoomed in. I saw the date hovering in the air. January 4th, 2026. We were looking at the Pacific Ocean, specifically the Ring of Fire. I expected an earthquake. I expected a tsunami. I braced myself for destruction, but what I saw was far more terrifying and beautiful. "The earth has a voice," Jesus said, "and it has been groaning for redemption. On this day, it will sing." I watched as a sound wave, visible as a ripple of iridescent violet light, erupted from the depths of the ocean floor. It wasn't a destructive blast. It was a frequency. As the wave traveled, hitting the coasts of Japan, California, and Chile, it didn't topple buildings. It disabled technology. I watched as advanced weapon systems, drones, missile guidance servers, and military communication grids simply went silent. The violet wave passed through them, and the silicon chips fused, not from heat, but from a harmonic resonance that science hasn't even discovered yet. "The silence of war," Jesus declared. "For 6 hours on January 4th, no weapon on Earth will fire. No missile will launch. The frequency of the Earth will reject the frequency of violence. The governments will panic. They will call it a solar flare or a cyber attack. But you will know the truth. It is my hand stopping the clock." I watched in awe. I saw soldiers in trenches in Eastern Europe pressing triggers that wouldn't click. I saw fighter jets grounded as their systems rebooted endlessly. For 6 hours, the world was forced into a ceasefire by the planet itself. "This is the first event," he told me, his eyes locking onto mine. "A warning that the tools of destruction are brittle in the face of the Creator. But the world will not repent with this alone. They will scramble to fix their machines. And so, the second event must follow." My heart hammered against my ribs, or my spiritual ribs. The reality of it was undeniable. This wasn't a hallucination. My brain, starved of oxygen, could not conjure the complex, terrified geopolitical ramifications I was seeing play out in seconds. "You must remember the date, Elias," he urged. "January 4th. When the weapons fall silent, tell them it is only the beginning." As the vision of the violet wave faded, the atmosphere around us grew colder, sharper. The comfort of the initial peace was replaced by a sense of urgency. Jesus turned his gaze from the ocean to the cities, the high-rises of New York, the sprawling metropolis of London, the dense streets of Tokyo. "The first event touches the physical," he said softly. "The second event touches the mind. Come." He stepped forward, walking on the air as if it were granite, and pulled me into the second vision. I felt a pulling sensation, a rush of wind, and I knew that what I was about to see would challenge everything I knew about human consciousness. The transition between the visions was not like a dream shifting scenes. It was like being pulled through the eye of a needle. The silence of the Pacific Ocean and the disabled warships vanished, replaced instantly by a cacophony of noise. We were standing in what looked like the nerve center of the world. I recognized the layout immediately. It was a fusion of the great stock exchanges of New York and London, overlaid with the frenetic energy of a major television newsroom. Screens covered every wall, tickers scrolled with frantic red numbers, and men and women in tailored suits shouted into telephones. It was the temple of modern commerce and information. But as I watched, the date on the wall monitors flickered and changed. January 12th, 2026. "The second event," Jesus said, his voice cutting through the chaotic din like a sword. "The first event disarmed their hands. This one will disarm their tongues." He gestured to a man on a podium, a high-ranking government official, a face I recognized from the nightly news. He was in the middle of a press conference, his face composed, his posture confident. He opened his mouth to speak, to deliver the usual prepared rhetoric about stability and economic growth. But no sound came out. The official frowned, tapping the microphone. He tried again. He strained, his face turning red, the veins in his neck bulging. He wasn't muted by technology. He was muted by physiology. He physically could not form the words. Then, panic set in. He tried to pivot, to tell a half-truth to assuage the crowd. Suddenly he gasped, clutching his throat as if he had swallowed a coal. When he finally spoke, the voice that emerged was strangled and terrified. We have stolen it," he blurted out. "The pension funds. They are empty. We used them to cover the debt." The room erupted. The official clamped his hands over his mouth, his eyes wide with horror. He hadn't meant to say it. The lie had died in his throat, and the truth had forced its way out like a projectile. "Watch the others," Jesus commanded. I looked around the room. It was happening everywhere. A CEO on a phone call in the corner tried to assure an investor that their assets were secure, but instead screamed, "The algorithm is rigged! We are insolvent!" A news anchor, reading a teleprompter about a minor diplomatic incident, suddenly stopped, tears streaming down her face, and declared, "People are dying there, and we aren't showing you the footage because the network is owned by the weapon manufacturers." Chaos. Absolute, unadulterated chaos. "The day of the glass tongue," Jesus whispered, though the sorrow in his eyes was profound. "On January 12th, for exactly 12 hours, the spirit of deceit will be bound. No human being on earth will be able to speak a lie. If they attempt to deceive, their voice will fail. If they persist, the truth will be ripped from them." I watched as the social order crumbled in minutes. Marriages ended in living rooms as spouses confessed affairs they had sworn to hide. Governments toppled as treaties were revealed to be shams. The media, stripped of its ability to spin narratives, went silent or broadcasted frantic, raw confessions. "Why?" I asked, trembling. "Lord, this will destroy society." "It will destroy the illusion of society," he corrected. "You cannot build a kingdom on a foundation of sand, Elias. The world thrives on darkness, on the comfortable lie. I am turning on the light. It will burn, yes, but it will also cleanse. Those who love the truth have nothing to fear on this day. Only those who hide will suffer." The scene was terrifying to my academic mind. I had spent my life analyzing history, and I knew that secrets were the glue that held civilizations together. Without them, the world was stripping itself naked. "You must warn them," he said, turning me away from the screaming newsroom. "Tell them to settle their accounts. Tell them to confess before the 12th. If they speak the truth voluntarily, they will find mercy. If they are forced by the day, they will find only shame." The newsroom dissolved into mist. The screaming faded. We were moving again, faster this time. The air grew sterile, smelling of antiseptic and ozone. The polished floors returned, but they were white linoleum now. We stood in a long hallway. I knew this place too. It was a hospital, specifically, a critical care ward. Rows of beds were visible through glass partitions, filled with patients hooked up to ventilators and monitors. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the machines was the only sound. The date materialized on the glass of the nurse's station. January 20th, 2026. "The third event," Jesus said softly. He walked toward one of the rooms. Inside lay a young girl, perhaps 7 years old, her head wrapped in bandages. Her chart hung on the door. Traumatic brain injury. Persistent vegetative state. 2 years. My heart broke for her. I knew the science. There was no coming back from that. "Science measures the brain," Jesus said, looking down at the child with infinite tenderness. "But I hold the spirit." He placed his hand on the glass. He didn't enter the room. He simply touched the barrier between the living and the dying. "Awaken." It wasn't a shout. It was a command to the soul. Inside the room, the girl's eyes snapped open. There was no grogginess, no slow return to consciousness. She sat up, pulling the ventilation tube from her mouth with steady hands. She looked around, confused for a moment, and then a radiant smile broke across her face. She looked directly at the empty corner of the room, waving, as if seeing an old friend. "Mommy!" she yelled, her voice clear and strong. "I saw him! I saw the man in the light!" I spun around. Down the hallway, alarms began to ring. Not alarms of failure, but alerts of activity. In the next room, an elderly man who had been in a coma for a decade sat up and asked for water. Further down, a young man who had overdosed and been declared brain dead began to weep and pray. The Great Awakening, Jesus said. On January 20th, across the globe, 70,000 souls currently trapped in the twilight of comas and vegetative states will return. They will not just wake up, Elias. They will return with a message. What message, Weiss? I asked, watching nurses run down the hall, dropping their clipboards in shock. Doctors were rushing into rooms, shining lights into eyes that were already bright with a supernatural clarity. They have been with me, Jesus replied. While their bodies slept, their spirits have been in my courts. They are being sent back as witnesses. They will speak of heaven. They will speak of judgment. They will speak of things your science says are impossible because they have seen the other side of the veil. I watched the reunion of the girl with her parents, who had just rushed in. The mother fell to the floor, sobbing. The father looked terrified. The girl was telling them about a garden, about a song that never ends, about a king who told her it wasn't time yet. This will confound your medical journals, Jesus said. Neurologists will have no explanation for how regenerated brain tissue appeared overnight. Atheists will try to call it mass hysteria, but they cannot explain the medical charts. This is the mercy of God, Elias. Before the end, I am sending messengers from the grave to the living. I felt a lump in my throat that I couldn't swallow. As a historian, I dealt with dead text. Here, I was witnessing the conquering of death itself. The sheer logistical impossibility of it staggered me. 70,000 witnesses returning simultaneously. The weapons will fail, Jesus recited, his eyes boring into mine. The lies will be silenced. The sleepers will wake. That is 3. He stepped closer to me. The hospital corridor began to fade, the white walls dissolving into the darkness of the cosmos once again. But the 4th event, he said, his demeanor shifting from tender to grave. The 4th event will not be a gift. It will be a reckoning. The earth has signaled. The mind has been exposed. The spirit has returned. Now, we must look at the seats of power. He grabbed my arm, and for the first time, I felt fear. Not the awe I had felt before, but a primal fear. The scenery didn't shift to a place on earth this time. It shifted to the shadows behind the earth. Prepare yourself, Elias, he warned. What you are about to see will make you wish you had stayed in the dark. The darkness behind the earth was not empty space. It felt thick, populated by shadows that moved with malicious intent. We were hovering over the geopolitical landscape again, but this time, the focus wasn't on the public faces of government. It was on the private, hidden places, the bunkers, the exclusive boardrooms, the server farms buried under mountains. The date seared itself into my vision. January 27th, 2026. The 4th event, Jesus declared, his voice now thundering with the authority of a judge. The breaking of the puppeteers. I watched as a network of golden lines appeared over the globe, connecting specific individuals. I saw men in high-rise offices in Geneva, warlords in undisclosed compounds, and tech moguls in Silicon Valley. These were the people who truly ran the world, the architects of wars, the manufacturers of plagues, the hoarders of resources. They thought they were untouchable. On this day, Jesus said, I will cut the strings. I watched in stunned silence as the golden lines snapped. Instantly, the digital walls these men had built to protect themselves collapsed. It wasn't a hack. It was a divine transparency. I saw their bank accounts, trillions of dollars stolen from the poor, suddenly becoming public record on every banking interface in the world. I saw their private communications, plotting famine and unrest, scrolling across the tickers of Times Square and Shibuya Crossing. But it was more than just data. I saw them running. The men who treated the world like a chessboard were fleeing their offices, terrified, because a physical light was chasing them. Wherever they tried to hide, dark rooms, underground vaults, the light followed, revealing them. They have loved the darkness, Jesus said, so the darkness will flee from them. On January 27th, there will be nowhere left to hide. The people will see who has been starving them. The anger of the nations will rise, but it will be a righteous anger. The idols of power will fall not by the sword, but by the weight of their own exposed sins. The sight of these untouchable figures cowering in fear was satisfying in a primal way, but Jesus turned my face away. Do not rejoice in their destruction, Elias. Pray for their repentance. For the final event is not for them. It is for the remnant. The shadows fled. The earth below us changed one last time. The chaotic energy of the exposure died down, replaced by a stillness that felt pregnant with anticipation. The atmosphere turned a soft, twilight blue. The final date appeared, pulsing with a heartbeat of its own. January 31st, 2026. The fifth event, he whispered. The reign of mercy. I looked down at the cities, the villages, the deserts. I saw people standing in the streets, looking up. They were tired. They had seen the weapons fail, the liars exposed, the dead wake, and the powerful fall. They were shaken to their core. Then the sky opened. It didn't rain water. It rained what looked like liquid amber, a golden glowing mist that descended slowly from the heavens. It touched every continent simultaneously. This is the outpouring I promised through the prophet Joel, Jesus explained. It is the last great invitation. I watched as the mist touched people. A woman in a wheelchair in Rio de Janeiro stood up, her legs reforming instantly. A man in a prison cell in North Korea fell to his knees, his chains falling off not physically, but spiritually, as the light flooded his damp cell. In Iran, in China, in the secular universities of Europe, including my own Oxford, I saw people weeping, not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization of love. On January 31st, he told me, I will bypass the gatekeepers. I will not speak through pastors or priests or prophets. I will speak directly to the heart of every man, woman, and child. For 1 hour, every soul on earth will hear my voice calling their name. They will know that I am, and they will have to choose. The beauty of it was too much. I felt my spirit unraveling. I wanted to stay in that golden mist forever. Lord, let me stay, I begged, tears streaming down my face. Don't send me back to the gray world. Let me stay in the rain. Jesus turned to me. He placed both hands on my shoulders. The heat of his touch was like a branding iron, painful and perfect. The rain has not fallen yet, Elias. You must go back to till the soil. They won't believe me, I cried. I am a historian. I am a skeptic. They will say I had a stroke. They will say I am mad. They will, he agreed, a sad smile touching his lips. But some will listen, and for those few, you must speak. Tell them the dates. Tell them the king is coming. He leaned in close, his eyes burning into mine. And so you do not doubt yourself when the darkness of the world tries to reclaim you. He took my right hand. He pressed his thumb into the center of my palm. I felt a sharp, searing pain, like a bolt of lightning trapped in my nerve endings. Remember me, the world exploded into white. The sound of the ventilator was the first thing that came back. Whoosh click, then the pain. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. My chest ached. I tried to inhale, but a tube choked me. I gagged, and suddenly hands were on me. He's awake! Get the doctor! It's impossible. He's been flatlined for 9 minutes. Dr. Thorne? Elias? Can you hear me? I blinked, the harsh fluorescent lights of the ICU blinding me. I was back. The cold, sterile, heavy world was back. I felt a crushing weight of grief, a mourning for the light I had lost. I spent 3 days in the ICU. The doctors called me a medical marvel. They showed me the scans. My brain should have been mush. The hemorrhage was massive, yet the latest MRI showed nothing. No scarring, no damage. Just a healthy, 60-year-old brain that had inexplicably rebooted. They had their explanations. Spontaneous remission, glitch in the equipment, misdiagnosis. I listened to them in silence. I didn't argue. I didn't tell them about the violet wave or the glass tongue. Not yet. It wasn't until the 4th day, when the nurse removed the IV from my arm and helped me sit up to wash, that I got the confirmation I needed. I went to the bathroom sink to wash my hands. The water was cold. I looked at my reflection, pale, tired, old. I almost convinced myself it was a dream, a hallucination caused by dying neurons. Then I looked down at my right hand to dry it. There, in the center of my palm, the skin was different. It wasn't a scar. It was a perfect, circular indentation, the color of pearl against my pink skin. It didn't hurt, but it was warm to the touch, warmer than the rest of my body. I pressed my thumb against it, and for a split second, I smelled it again, the scent of ozone and starlight. I heard the echo of his voice. Remember me. I collapsed onto the cold bathroom tiles, weeping. Not out of fear, but out of gratitude. It is now November 25th. I have resigned from my position at Oxford. I have liquidated my retirement savings. I am publishing this account on every platform that will host it. I know how this sounds. I know my colleagues are already writing papers about my psychotic break, but I don't care. I have given you the dates. January 4th, the silence of war. January 12th, the day of the glass tongue. January 20th, the Great Awakening. January 27th, the breaking of the puppeteers. January 31st, the reign of mercy. You have 2 months. Mock me if you must. Analyze this text for signs of dementia. But when the weapons fail on the 4th, do not look for a scientific explanation. Look to the skies and prepare your hearts. The clock has started.